Hello, thank you for joining us today for our interview with Louis Pasteur, the great French microbiologist who changed the field of science forever. Louis was born on December 27th in 1822 in Dole, France. His studies at École Normale Supérieure propelled him deep into the scientific field, one where he contributed greatly to the discovery of microbes. This discovery was a catalyst for many other discoveries, including the pasteurization of milk and the rabies vaccine. Today, we will be discussing Mr. Pasteur's rabies discovery and what it meant for the people of his time.
Welcome, Louis Pasteur. It's great to have you with us. I would like to ask you a few questions. Let's just start out with, how would you describe yourself and your significance in the field of microbiology?
Well, I'm a French chemist and I mainly focus on microbiology. After growing up in a poor home, I attended École Normale Supérieure, and from there began my scientific career. When I started out in the scientific world, I began observing bacteria, moving into the topic of microbes and their presence in the air, in nature, and the environment. I am proud to have come up with the idea of pasteurization, a process that prevents milk, wine, and similar drinks from spoilage and microbe growth. I also work heavily on disease prevention, for 3 of my children died at a young age from the disease typhoid. This gave me reason to create the vaccine for anthrax as well as one against rabies. I would describe myself as a determined man, always looking to find solutions to world problems that will help people for the better.
That's great, and we thank you for all you have done. Next, I would like to focus on your work with rabies. How did your earlier experiments and work lead you to the discovery of the rabies vaccine?
Well, before creating the vaccine for rabies, I had previously been doing many experiments involving animals. I was sent, around 1865, to the south of France to help out a friend who lived in a town whose silkworms were being struck by an unknown epidemic. After testing many silkworms and experiencing struggle, I came to a conclusion and helped many silkworm farmers. Then, following this discovery, I began to work on chicken cholera, which resulted in my vaccine for anthrax. After finding a cure and a vaccine for these diseases, I continued to work with animals and diseases coming from them. Rabies, at the time of my work, was affecting great numbers in France, and something needed to be done. People all throughout were dying painful deaths from this disease, and nobody knew how to cure it.
And we thank you for that. So, what did your colleagues believe about microbes and vaccinations prior to your discovery?
Well, there are many different theories about where these diseases were coming from. The biggest was the miasma theory, which said that it was the bad air floating around that was making everyone sick. When I was doing my work, the city of London was a filthy one, along with many other cities. People were throwing waste out their windows, contaminating the streets and water. I soon realized that tiny organisms called microbes were the cause of these diseases. It was a huge step in the scientific world.
Congratulations. Now, can you explain to our audience in greater detail what you did concerning the rabies vaccine?
Well, during this time, rabies was very common in France. People were suffering and dying, and nobody knew how to cure this disease. The affected people had to die painful deaths. When I was younger, I remember seeing people dying on the streets from rabies, so I thought it was my time to figure out a cure for it. To start out my research, my partner Emily Brew and I traced rabies back to the nervous system, identifying that it started from where the bite occurred and traveled up to the brain. And once it reached the brain, it was when the trouble starts. The microbe was too hard to see, and it cannot be grown, so we kept it alive in the brains of rabbits. We infected hundreds of dogs with the deadly virus, all of them dying, except one. This one was rare, so we decided to infect him again with the virus, and he survived. This was a huge step for my team. Then we began drying the spinal cords of dead rabbits infected with rabies. We did this for 14 days. We then gave them to the dogs, and the next day we gave them a dose of spinal cord that had been dried for 13 days, and so on until we infected them with a cord only dried for 1 day, and the dogs were immune.
Wow, that's amazing. What effect did your discovery of the rabies vaccination have on society?
Well, obviously people were very excited that we were now able to cure a disease that was once so frightening. The death rate went down dramatically. Scientists who had once denied my beliefs and thought it was impossible were practically bowing before me. It was very humbling and very rewarding for the people. People from all over would come to see me speak or watch me perform my experiments.
It seemed to take you a long time to find this cure. How did you stay motivated and, well, not give up on your experiment?
That's a hard one to answer because it was very challenging for me. My partners always wanted to quit on me, and sometimes I did too, but I knew that I needed to finish what I had started. I also did everything hundreds of times to make sure it was right. We tested hundreds of dogs, my assistants thought I was crazy, and at times I was. As these experiments went on, I was getting very old, making it harder to do a lot of the work I once could do. We, for the most part, locked ourselves in the lab until we found the solution to our problem. And it was worth every minute because we helped change society for the better.
So how did you feel when you gave the first vaccine to the young Joseph Meister?
Well, it was definitely one of the biggest risks I've ever taken, and a scary one at that. I was very afraid that the new vaccine would have some sort of horrible side effects that would cause him agonizing pain. There was also the possibility that it would kill him, of course. Yes, it was very scary, but since the boy was on the verge of death as it was, I decided to have faith in myself and trust that my experiments worked to produce a successful vaccine. I was elated when it proved to be successful. That was the first time the vaccine had been used on anything other than dogs. We had used the spinal cord of an infected rabbit that had been dried for 15 days. I figured I might as well try the vaccine now. It was the best option because if nothing was done, the boy was going to die. I gave him the 13 different inoculations, and by the end of the treatment, he acted as if he'd never been bit.